The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K first came out all the way back in 1820. That's the year that Antarctica was first discovered, the year James Monroe was re-elected President of the United States of America, and the year Jean Victor Poncelet developed an inward flow water turbine. No. See what I've done there? I've made a mistake, typo, I've got the numbers the wrong way around. The camera actually came out in 2018. It's just that it feels like this camera has been around for forever. And yet, if you're looking to get yourself a cinema camera, Blackmagic are still making this thing and sell it for just over $1,000, making it one of the cheapest cinema cameras out there on the market. But like with a lot of cameras, is that actually the real cost of going out and shooting? Because you're probably going to need a few other things to make this camera work, and a few more things to get the very best out of it. This is an update video from one I made a few years back because time moves on, new technology and options have become available, and a lot of people still seem to be watching that video. I'll leave a link to the older video down in the description, and of course there will be links to all the products I talk about in this video. You didn't think I was going to miss out on all those affiliate commissions, did you? If you're going to shoot video, you're going to need to record it onto something. You've got three options with the Blackmagic 4K. You have an SD card, a CFast card, and a USB-C hard drive. By far the best value for money when shooting with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is the use of an external USB-C drive. I have one of these Samsung T5 drives that were super popular when this camera first came out. They're kind of hard to find now, and if you can, you're going to have to pay a price for them. However, I wouldn't bother. These drives were recommended for the original RAW options that were in the camera. Now with B-RAW from Blackmagic being the only option to shoot RAW, I would go with the recommended Samsung T7 Shield Portable. You can get one for £169.99 in the UK or $169.80 in the US. Who's working out that exchange rate? I'm not sure. Blackmagic recommends that it can shoot 4K DCI Blackmagic RAW 3:1 up to 60 frames a second, but do make sure it is the Shield option and not the standard T7 because they are not recommended, and I've heard a few things about them not holding up particularly well. And I've seen online some people have had trouble with the 4TB version, so best to stick with the recommended 1 or 2 TB models. The next option is an SD card. The advantage of using the SD card slot is you don't have to have loose cables hanging out the side of the camera, just waiting to get snagged on something. You might not think that this is going to happen to you, but trust me, at some point in time, it definitely will. I have this 128GB V90 Sony Tough Card, and it works great shooting 4K DCI 4:1 RAW up to 60 frames a second. It's useful for when you want to use the camera in this kind of minimal setup style, just the bare bones. The downside is it's pricey for an SD card, although prices have come down. I'm pretty sure I remember paying around nearly £300. You can get one of them for about 170 quid nowadays in the UK, and a little bit cheaper than that over in the US. The other downside is most card readers won't transfer the footage across to your computer as fast as the USB-C SSD will. It doesn't take a terrible amount of time, but it is something that you have to put up with. However, it is very versatile, with it being a current medium used in many cameras still. That's why I wasn't happy is not quite the right word, but I wasn't upset as much at paying that hefty price tag, because it's a good card that I can use in a number of other cameras. That just leaves the CFast, and well, I've never bothered to get one because they are just so darn expensive. The best value one that I could find was this integral 1TB CFast 2.0 for just over 400 quid, which is claimed that it works with the Blackmagic 4K, although Blackmagic haven't actually included it in their list of compatible cards. You might be able to find one for better value in whatever region of the world you live in, but if I was you, I would go with the Samsung T7 Shield. You get twice the storage at less than half the price. And remember, CFast is a pretty old technology now. Most newer cameras don't use it, opting for CF Express in some form or another, so any investment may not be compatible with future upgrades. If you're thinking of getting a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, then you've probably heard that the battery life is a little underwhelming, and I'm not going to claim otherwise. If you want to do any sustained shooting with this camera, you really are going to need to figure out a battery solution. For a long time I was rocking this. It's an adapter that allows you to connect Sony MP style batteries to the DC power port of the camera. I would attach this to the top of the camera using the built-in screw, and then you just simply connect it to the DC power port on the side of the camera. Everyone seems to have some of these Sony MP style batteries knocking about. They come in all sorts of different sizes, and the own brand versions are relatively cheap on Amazon. If you are going to go with this power solution, you need to make sure that you get one that outputs 12 volts. Not all of them do this, and I've heard that if you don't have one that does 12 volts but puts out a lower power output, the camera will run, but you'll slowly be burning out the motherboard on the inside of the camera, and obviously that's not something that you want to do. So make sure you shop around and that it is one that's capable of outputting 12 volts. I've now moved on to using one of these mini V-mount batteries, and I've got to say that this is the best way to power this camera. These batteries last 3 to 4 hours easily, they charge incredibly fast, they're nice and small, and you get a number of ports. You've got 2 DTAP style ones on either side, and then on the top of this one you've got a couple of USB-A style ports. So you can power more than just the camera with this. You can link it up to a monitor or a follow focus or whatever you want to. I'd recommend that you get one with a power indicator on the side like this one, because the camera will not show the actual amount of battery that you have left. It will show the amount of voltage left, and that could get a little bit confusing. So it's much easier if you just have a little indicator on the side of the battery like this. This battery is a Moman. You get these in the UK and Europe. I'm not sure if they're available in the US. I've never seen them available in the US, but there are many different batteries like this and knocking around on the internet. They're probably all made in the same factory, if we're honest, but yeah, I'd go with something like this. Unfortunately, if you do use this, then you're going to need a DTAP to Blackmagic DC power cable to actually link the camera and the battery together. And like all camera stuff, it isn't the cheapest, costing around £25. If you're going with a V-mount battery of some type, then you're going to have to come up with a solution for fixing it to the camera in some way. I've gone with this battery plate from Small Rig. It's cost effective, it's nice and small, it works just how you'd want it to work. The battery slides on here, nice and securely. This is just a dummy plate, so unlike some other ones where the battery will actually connect to some pins along the bottom, this is just a way of holding the battery in place, and it's why you need that DTAP cable to get the electricity into the camera. There are other types where the cable is built into the battery plate, but they're much more expensive and they're a lot bigger. And so on both of those fronts, they didn't seem to be a good idea for what I wanted. I have the battery plate connected to the camera with these rods. They're really cheap, I think they were from Small Rig, but you could get them from anyone. I've got this Small Rig base plate that just screws onto the bottom of the camera, or the cage in this case. It's adjustable, so you can put the battery as close to the back of the screen or as far away as the rods will allow you to. Small Rig make a few different styles of these battery plates. I just went with the generic cheapest one that I could find, and it's worked just fine. I've not had any problems whatsoever with it. So I just mentioned a cage, and if you're going to build the camera out in this way, you're probably going to need a cage to mount everything onto. Again, I went with one from Small Rig. There are many more out there from different brands. The advantage of the Small Rig one is that you can pretty much use it with any components. It's not restricted to only using Small Rig parts. If you go with something like the tilter cage, it looks very nice, but things like the top handle are proprietary to the actual cage, so you couldn't just use that handle with another cage or another camera. I've got this thing attached to the top of my cage. It's part of the Falcam F22 quick release system, and it allows me to attach a number of parts that are in this system, like this top handle. Everything slides together very simply, just like a tripod quick release plate would. And if you want to take it off, you just press this little button on the side and it slides straight off. When you're building your rig out and you've got a battery on the back and a heavy lens, having a top handle is a must. Of course, it can help with getting handheld low-angle shots, but having it for carrying is so useful, and it's a must for when you need to pass the camera off to somebody else. This Valcam stuff all feels really well made. The top handle has this really nice textured finish to it. I think it might be some type of wood, but I'm not exactly sure. But one of the best things is that you can attach these little F22 release plates to other things and make them work with the system. For example, I have one attached to the bottom of my monitor that allows me to attach it to this Valcam monitoring mount, and I can attach this to the mounting point I've attached to the top of the cage or to the one on the top of the handle. Speaking of monitors, you definitely don't need a monitor to use this camera. You've got this nice big screen on the back of the camera, but it can make your life easier if you do have one. Obviously, this screen is fixed. You can't flip it out or turn it over in any way. If you're going to do anything where you need to be filming yourself, like a YouTube video, then it's incredibly awkward not being able to see yourself. Although if you're looking for a camera mainly for YouTube, there are much better options out there. But having a monitor isn't just useful for filming yourself. There are all sorts of other situations where you need to be able to see what you're shooting, and the screen being flat on the back of the camera isn't that helpful. Low shots, high shots, shots where you want to set the camera into a limited space can all be very frustrating if you're using the built-in monitor. I've been using this Portkeys monitor for the last few years. I have a whole video about it that you can watch here or in the description. But in a nutshell, what's so good about this monitor is that it lets you control the camera over Wi-Fi. So not only can you see what you're shooting easier, but you can actually change those shooting settings without needing to access the back of the camera. This allows me to push the V-mount battery up closer to the screen and keep the rig nice and compact. There's actually a newer version of this monitor that you may want to consider, and there's also a 7-inch version as well. Links in the description. Another thing that doesn't come with the camera but is essential is a lens, but you knew that already. There are quite literally hundreds of lenses you could use with this camera. I'm not even going to attempt to cover them all. Some of the more popular ones are the Sigma 18-35 f1.8, the Tokina 11-16 f2.8 and the Panasonic 12-35mm f2.8 Lumix. Some need adapters, some don't, but that's a whole nother video. It's a shame that the Blackmagic 4K doesn't have a built-in ND system like the 6K Pro. If it did, it would probably be the perfect camera, at least for me. So if you want to get a shallow depth of field shot, you're going to need to get a variable ND filter, something like the 7 Artisans one, which is one of my favourites. It's a variable ND that goes from 1.5 to 8 stops of ND, but other than the big range, it's kind of standard in how it works. Or you could go with something like this Nissi Swift system. It's a variable ND system that lets you stack other filters like the black mist filters on top of each other. It's good and it works pretty well. However, the problem is that you still need to unscrew these filters when you don't want to have any ND, and then you have to screw them back on when you do need ND. I absolutely hate this. You need step-up rings that match the filter sizes of every lens that you've got. They constantly get themselves jammed together, and it's such a struggle to get them apart. It always takes longer than is needed. It's just so annoying. So recently I've been trying out this. It's the Freewell Eiger matte box. It's a matte box that, once you have attached it to the lens, allows you to drop in a variable ND filter like this. You control how much ND you want with this dial, and then if you don't want any, you just simply slide the filter out and continue shooting without the need for the unscrewing and the whole mess that you have to get into with that. It's not perfect, but it's a big improvement on the standard variable NDs. Plus, you get a matte box. I'll probably do a full review of this in the very near future. So that's it. I can't think of anything else that would be deemed as essential to get this camera working. If you know of something that I've missed, then do let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe, or watch another video. Ta-ra for now.